Hey Lisa, so you mentioned in your message that I had said square 12 is not a perfect square, and that is true because when we ask ourselves what number times itself makes 12, there isn't an obvious answer to that. Versus, let's say we had 25. If I say what number times itself makes 25, you would say 5 times 5 makes 25. So 5 squared, the square root of 5 squared would be 5. So since this is 5 times 5, when I take the square root, it would just be plain 5 because I can write it as a squared. With 12, there is no number that does that. 2 times 2 makes 4, 3 times 3 makes 9, 4 times 4 is 16. So 12 is somewhere between the 3 and the 4. You had mentioned, what about 12 squared, I think, in your message. 12 squared is a perfect square because that's really 144 as opposed to the 12 because we're squaring it versus not squared. So square root of 144 is the same as square root of 12 squared is the same as plain 12. But when we're asking what's the square root of 12, that's different because this only has one 12. This has a pair of 12s. So to take the square root of 12, what we got to do is look for one of these numbers that are listed here. If it isn't on this list of perfect squares in terms of how it factors, it doesn't do us any good because I can't take the square root of something unless it's a perfect square. So, if I'm trying to write it as the exact answer, we want to think of this as 4 times 3 because 4 is one of the perfect squares and it divides into 12. Once we have the square root of 4 times the square root of 3, I can use that property that says I can think of those as separate. Square root of 4 would be 2 because 2 times 2 makes 4. Square root of 3 we would just express as square root of 3 because there is no number that times itself, at least in terms of integers, that would make that come back to 3. As a decimal, it would be 1.7, and then those decimals go on forever. But so when we're simplifying, we're trying to find the ones that come out to perfect squares as opposed to like here. So let's say we had, what's a good one? 98. So looking at 98, it's an even number. So if I went 2 into 98, it would go, 2 goes into that 4 times, 8, 1, 8, 2 goes into that 9 times. And so 98 is, actually let me write that the other direction, 49 times 2. And so 49 is one of our perfect squares, and so we can think of that as square root of 49 times the square root of 2. Square root of 49 would be 7, and root 2 would be left. Yeah, let's see. I was trying to see if I can think of another good one off the top of my head. Let's say we had square root of 40. So 40 could be 1 and 40 wouldn't be super useful. How about 2 and 20 wouldn't be 3. It could be 4 and 10. It could be 5 and 8. But so again, the only number that does me any good out of any of these is 4 because it's the one that's a perfect square. And so let's think of that as 4 times 10. Square root of 4 brings out a 2. Square root of 10 is left behind. Hopefully in there that cleaned it up, but do holler if you still have